Welcome to the 2025 Teach Access Student Academy. I am Rolando Mendez, Director of Education here at Teach Access. For those joining just now, welcome to the Teach Access Student Academy. We are excited that you are spending your time with us to learn about disability and accessibility. Today, we have one more session to go, and don't forget we have 6 more sessions tomorrow. Before we start, I wanted to make sure you know a few key items. We have captions provided by a live captioner. So to access those, you can click the CC icon in the bottom menu bar. We also have American Sign Language interpreters. Find the interpretation button at the bottom menu bar with an icon that looks like a globe. Click that and select American Sign Language, and a new window will pop open that you can move around your screen for preferred viewing. Feel free to use the Q&A feature to send questions during the session. Everyone will be able to view this question, which can also be submitted anonymously. If you have any other questions, concerns, or accommodation needs during the session, please use the chat feature and send a message to the host. The session will be recorded and made available to everyone after the event. It's with pleasure that I introduce Samantha Christopher, Product Inclusion Manager, PayPal, to present a story about a classroom. Samantha, the room is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, Teach Access. So excited to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Alrighty, so hi everyone. I'm Sam, a blonde-haired woman wearing a red sweater. I use she, her pronouns, and today I'm here to share a little bit more about who I am and why accessibility matters to me. So in order to do that, I need to tell you about a classroom that ignited my journey into the accessibility world. But before I tell you about that classroom, I'd love to learn more about your own classrooms. So in the chat, share your favorite teacher's name from growing up and why. It could be a preschool, elementary, middle, high school teacher, or just someone that you have learned something from. And while you are adding that into the chat, some of the things that I am seeing is that your teacher did this type of thing to make you feel seen, heard, and valued. And I want to label that behavior as something we often don't give our teachers enough credit for. Amongst their many responsibilities, they took the time perhaps to empathize with you, to form a connection. And that quality is something we as humans are all responsible for. We're in charge of listening to our users. So for a teacher, that's their student. And no matter what makes them different, we have to deliver the best experience for them so that we can continue to be meaningful to them. So whoever you listed in the chat, I encourage you to reach out to this teacher after this presentation and thank them because we could all use more teachers doing this impactful work. And speaking of meaningful experiences, when I think about my favorite teacher, I am taken back to a classroom where I saw the importance of making learning equitable for all. Nestled within the busy city of Nashville is a school called Harris Hillman. To many, this K-12 school looks like any typical school: books, extracurriculars, advanced curriculum, but it's one of the most unique places in the world, and you may be wondering why. So the thing is every student at Harris Hillman has a severe, profound disability, and no one student has the same diagnosis. You may be thinking, how the heck does this school teach all of these students and help them lead independent lives? Well, the truth is, they've mastered something I think the rest of the world is still uncovering. That true inclusion is born out of equitable access. Let me say that again. This school taught me that true inclusion is born out of equitable access. And this saying is one that I have carried with me in my career every day since. So how did Harris Hillman succeed at creating a truly inclusive environment? The truth of the matter is that this school was born out of a need to better accommodate individuals with severe and profound disabilities. Most students at Harris Hillman were transferred here because their previous school placement was not equipped to support or prioritize them. There was always something more important than providing them with the time, resources, and empathy they deserved. That is until Harris Hillman ideated a solution. They quickly recognized it's not the people, it's the system. And instead of asking how can we have a person change, we can start asking what's wrong with the system. So there was me, Sam, a bright-eyed, hopeful K through 12 special educator, and I entered Harris Hillman starting my teaching career. It was here that I learned the secret sauce of how this school operates. Spoiler alert, they apply a human centered approach to teaching. Instead of questioning their students' ability, the default assumption was that each student could do anything they wanted to do, and it was our job as teachers, as a system, to design a teaching program that would work for them. This meant observing how they learn best, understanding their communication style, code developing and designing a teaching plan with them, reinforcing that learning alongside them with the other support team as well. And then you iterate because ultimately what works for one can't work for all. And behaviors and mindsets are always evolving. Solving problems for our vulnerable customers is much like solving problems for my students with severe and profound disabilities. Vulnerable customers are considered underserved. They experience friction with everyday products, including ours, and their experience is far from equitable or accessible. So, as mentioned earlier, in order to make true inclusion a reality, we must observe, understand, co design, and iterate, reinforce, and iterate on our solutions with our users. People on the corporate world often describe this as creating a product from a human point of view that is desirable, feasible, and viable. So when we're saying something is desirable, it's a product that people want or need. If it's feasible, it's a product that can be created with new or existing technology. And a product that is viable is a product that can be profitable. But really, as I've mentioned, that secret sauce is applying a user centered approach to problem solving. So it's where all three of those areas intersect. And so, in order to ensure true inclusion is possible, it's important to have practitioners like you advocating for customers with disabilities and underserved needs at every stage of the process. And you can do that by applying a user centered approach to product management. So, some ways that I have done this as a product manager: one, I have interviewed and observed people with disabilities using my products. By interviewing them and really seeing how they use their products, you can get a better understanding of the challenges they face and what they want to accomplish. Another thing you can do is design and develop a solution by collaborating across teams. By getting different perspectives, by challenging assumptions, you can bring those with lived experience in to design with you. And last but not least, you can test accessibility early and often. You must consider the unhappy paths. You should stress test the core actions so that you can bring real users in to test the solution. And then you can discover ways to improve and innovate your idea just to make sure that it's not just baseline accessible, but it's truly innovative and inclusive. So you're probably wondering, why does accessibility matter to me? The reason I found myself in the product inclusion space all goes back to the classroom. Harris Hillman students were recipients of many assistive technology donations. In theory, this was great because there is a steep expense to assistive technology, which is a problem for another day. But the problem was this technology was created for them, not by or with them and their caregivers and support team. So when I joined the accessibility team at Yahoo, I was actively trying to understand how to retroactively fix technology that was broken. Before joining the experience innovation team at PNC to help build innovations with an accessible and inclusive mindset. And lastly, here at PayPal, I am doing this every day. I'm thinking about how we can create the next best thing with the customer in mind from the start. And I always go back to this because it's really my why. When I think about why it's so important for accessibility to be part of everyday conversations, it's because it's the user. It's who I'm thinking of. They need access to the things they love, their email, their finances, their news, their social media. And we have the ability with technology to create not just something that works for them, but really works for all. And so when I'm thinking a little bit more about accessible inventions that I love, I think about IKEA Visibles, which, if you aren't familiar with, it's a little adaptation that makes their furniture really accessible and inclusive to everybody. I think about the accessible helmet with AT&T and Gallaudet. They recognize that football players who are signing need a way to communicate their plays without letting the other team know. So they created this helmet with them in mind. And last but not least, Apple's hearing aid is also very top of mind for me because when we think about how Apple is really creating products for all, we are taken to a phone that everyone has, AirPods that everyone has, and now people who use hearing aids can actually get the benefit of leveraging technology they already have. So accessible inventions are co-designed with the user in mind. They're powerful stories that share the why, and ultimately they have an end-to-end inclusive process. So as I come to the end of my presentation and open up for questions, I just wanted to echo that taking my experience from classroom to corporate world has been truly based on lived experience and keeping the user in mind from the start. And it's of utmost importance to me as I continue to create and design and develop products that we keep that user-centric, empathetic mindset. So with that, I will pause and open up for questions.
This is Rolando speaking. There's a question by Kristen. Is Harris Hillman open to autistic children that are otherwise able-bodied?
So that's a great question. Harris Hillman is based in Nashville, and I'm not 100% sure their current recruiting criteria. I encourage you to look them up and see and learn more about them. But it's an incredible school with an incredible mission.
So Samantha, another question would have is like, how would you, based on your experience, how would you advise, what advice would you give students? So to think about the things they could do now as students before entering the workforce to advocate and for getting equity and inclusion considered in their spaces they're at.
So I think the most important thing is to bring your audience along. For me, user research and showing them why it's so valuable, hearing from those with lived experience from the start is the top thing that I find to be super successful in storytelling. And then coupling those stories with data. So whatever you can share about the user group that you're designing for or why it's a problem, elevating that with data and then accompanying that with lived experience and stories is something you can definitely do to really prove your point.
Thanks. The next question is from Christine. Do you create personas about your users, specifically those that include users with different abilities and disabilities, as part of the development process that help inform the site?
So 1000%. So I would say that in terms of personas, something that's really important when you're creating any type of persona is to make sure you're having an inclusive screener. So when you are doing recruitment, when you are doing any user research, you want to make sure that you're asking questions that allow you to get a wide range of experiences. So you want to include questions not just about disability and assistive technology use, but also about gender, race, ethnicity, their language, if English is their second language, their financial vulnerability as well. So these are all different types of questions that can get you more of a holistic picture of who your user is. And then when you're creating personas, it's great to, again, disability is one part of an identity. It can be visible or invisible, which I'm sure you all have learned so far in the Student Academy. And so you want to make sure you're showcasing all aspects of someone's identity, not just those that are visible.
Thanks. A lot of questions coming in. We love this.
Good, I
This
love
one from
it.
one from Monisha. What are the biggest challenges you face in advocating for or implementing accessibility?
So, what I have noticed in my career, which is really exciting, is people are all bought in. They see the value, they understand the importance of designing for all. They recognize the impact of the curb cut effect. So, if you haven't heard that story yet, but curb cuts on the street, perhaps were designed with people who are using wheelchairs, but really can be used by all people who are pushing a stroller, people who are carrying luggage. So they recognize the importance of universal design and inclusive design. So that's great. The challenge that you might come up is more prioritization. So how can you prove that an accessible or an inclusive innovation is ultimately going to drive revenue, drive impact, drive more users? And that is the type of forecasting that is so important to be able to do with any feature. And that's what I have really strived to do in my career is, again, marry the importance of the feature and the value of the feature with also the value that the feature will drive.
Great. We have another question from Heather. What is your advice for how small businesses and startups can incorporate various accessibility features into their products?
I think that's a great question. So, especially at PayPal, where our customers are not just those who have PayPal and Venmo accounts, but also small businesses. And that's super central to the work that we do. And I would say that in terms of really amplifying accessibility and inclusion, no matter the size of business, you can start by doing internal things. So perhaps you're making your documents and your PDFs and your PowerPoints accessible. Perhaps you are starting to create more of an inclusive and accessible meeting and event environment. And it's those small signals that really mean the most to your customers. So again, if you're using an accommodation statement in an event that you're throwing, or if you have multiple ways to allow somebody to check out in an inclusive way, those are all different ways that you can start making small wins to creating a more inclusive environment.
Thanks. There's a comment in the Q&A about expressing concern about exploiting people with disabilities when creating these accessibility features or products that address accessibility. Can you share any insights on that?
So that's why it's so important. And like I mentioned in my presentation, applying a user-centered approach to problem solving is so important. So the reason why I shifted from being a teacher in the classroom to joining the corporate world is because I saw technology that was created for somebody, not by and with them. And I think often people with disabilities or people in the assistive tech community, if they're not involved from the start, you're ultimately going to be creating something that excludes them. So it's so important that you go in with the right intentions and the right mindset and the right process to really bring them along the journey and really have them be part of the process.
Great. The next question, can you share more about your career transition into your first role in the tech field? What did it take for you to break into a new industry and highlight your transferable skills, knowledge in accessibility?
So this is a great question, and I swear I wasn't paid by Teach Access to say this. But the reason why I was able to make the transition from the teaching world into the corporate world is because I discovered Teach Access. So I was somebody who loved the Teach Access mission and actually reached out to join Teach Access and see if there were ways for me to learn and contribute to the mission of really embedding accessibility into all different majors, undergrad, graduate curriculums. And through that reach out, I was able to actually get connected to the industry partners that Teach Access has. And I went through the interview process to secure my first internship. So there's a lot that goes into that. and obviously a lot of hard work too. But I would say that I'm really grateful for the Teach Access community because they were able to connect me with academia, industry, and advocacy organizations to learn more about not just the accessibility community, but what types of roles go beyond just teaching. So, and beyond just product management. There's all different ways to embed accessibility into the work that you do.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that story. So, how can we encourage the development of features that might not necessarily drive value or revenue in any obvious way, but because it helps people and is the right thing to do?
So I think that goes back to sort of your why and why you are creating the feature. So ultimately, if you're taking a human centered approach to design, um, it has to be a feature that's not just desirable and feasible, but also viable. So, yes, sometimes there won't be a feature that ultimately is going to be the most viable at the start. But the reality is if you're truly taking a human centered approach to problem solving, you're thinking about how might we do this thing to improve the experience or impact the end user in a positive way. And if you take that approach, the business case becomes more about not just the viability, but the why behind we're doing this thing.
Thanks. So, next question is from Joe N. How can we make sure that the accessibility of assistive devices include economically marginalized populations because AT tends to be expensive, which leaves particular groups excluded?
I 100% agree with that problem. And I think that's what's so powerful about the accessibility community. There are so many different organizations that are approaching problem solving in a different way. So I know of many organizations that recognize that problem and are coming up with marketplaces that are selling AT at cost. And I think even makeathons that are happening where you are able to put together AT for an end user that ultimately will be at a lower cost. So I think you're recognizing a problem that's super important. Now it's about thinking about how might we create a solution that will ultimately lower the cost and ultimately benefit the end user. So I agree it's a problem. I agree that we haven't fully solved it, but I think what's exciting about the accessibility space is that we are constantly innovating. And I think Habengirma said it best. That accessibility drives innovation. And so that is something that I keep top of mind. We're always reinventing ourselves and always uncovering a new problem to solve.
Thanks. Next question is from Larry. What are the best arguments to get executives to dedicate resources to accessible design and development?
So I think the one thing that I have learned in my career thus far is ultimately it's all relationships and building relationships and telling that story. So the first thing that I would do is ultimately bring them along the process. So co-design with them, co-create with them, bring them into user research, share their stories, share the lived experiences, and have them recognize the problem themselves. Because once you're able to have them bought into the problem, it makes driving solution creation even better. That's really the goal is you want leadership to recognize the importance of accessibility and inclusion themselves. And sometimes you just need to bring them the problem so that they can really have that aha moment.
Okay, lots of questions coming in. We appreciate that from the audience. Next question. Do you feel like there are accessibility needs that are harder or easier to advocate for in the workplace?
So I think one of the things that I have recognized is that disability is ever evolving. As I mentioned, there's disabilities that are visible and invisible. There's also different needs that everyone is starting to have, especially in a post-COVID world. So in terms of designing for one or another, I don't think one's harder or not, but I think it's more of the ability to shift your target audience and recognize that there's a primary audience and then a secondary audience. And that's just something that is constantly shifting. So ultimately, you just need to know who your end user really is and what you are trying to design for them or solve for them, and then go from there. But ultimately, designing with accessibility and inclusion in mind is really taking a more universal approach.
Thanks. Next question is from Anasidora. I hope I said that name right. What is your experience with the culture shift from a classroom like at Harris Hillman to corporate work?
I love that question. I always miss the classroom, but I have recognized that my classroom has become these corporate environments. So my students might not be my K through 12 students that I've been used to having. They might be adults, but they all have various needs and are aspiring to learn. And so it's my job as a product manager to really educate them, increase their awareness, and drive their engagement in the work that we're doing. So there's similarities and differences, but it's why I started my presentation with thanking teachers, because education is so important, and I wouldn't be here without my previous experiences.
Next question is there any feasibility between the tech innovations and incorporation with the global humanitarian sector to reach people with economic challenges?
Yeah, so part of the reason why I was excited to join PayPal is because of the global perspective. And I think taking a global approach is so important. We can't have a US centric approach into product development and design. And it's why it's so valuable to collaborate with different countries and different stakeholders across industries. And I think Teach Access's whole way of they set up between industry, academia, and advocacy is so valuable because you're intersecting three different perspectives and three different industries and creating an end solution that ultimately will benefit all. And so, to your point, yes, economic financial vulnerability is 1000% a problem. And so, providing a solution that is global is so important. And really bringing them along is so important.
We have another question in the chat is by Angelina, how have you dealt with organizations that have resisted accessibility?
I think the one thing that I've learned in my career thus far is someone saying no is not a no, this is wrong. It's a no, not right now. And so I see every no as another opportunity to pitch a case better. So as I've mentioned, as you keep thinking about how you can create a business case that will resonate with your end user, you really have to think about how is it desirable, feasible, and viable for that end user at that moment in time, and recognize you're going to get some no's, but again, it's not a no, this isn't important. It's a no, it's not at the right moment. So you need to marry the cause with the time, and recognize that with the right case, it's going to go through.
Thanks. We have a couple of comments in the chat. We had one from Merrill Evans pointing that, about the assistive technology being affordable, the need for it to be affordable. We also have a comment from Kimberly. Thank you for acknowledging the issue with marginalizing low-income populations in this. The majority of the disabled community are not employed and have limited access to healthcare, which might cover some of these technologies. And, Kimberly shares just yesterday how she was able to purchase her first digital hearing aids with features she chose rather than have them limited and chose them for her because they were from Medicaid or charity. But it's because she recognizes that she has worked based in healthcare and I would never be able to pay for this out of pocket. I went without hearing aids for 6 years because of lack of access to tech. It's an issue that needs a lot of undivided attention.
I agree with that. It was so great to meet all of you, and thank you for all of your thoughtful questions. I think if you are to take one thing away from this presentation on a classroom that really has impacted my career and has driven my passion and accessibility, is it's the system, not the people. It's not on people with disabilities to advocate for the change they want to see. It's on all of us to really create the innovations that are going to drive the biggest impact for all. So keep that in mind as you approach any product design and development. And I look forward to seeing all of the impact that you all make in the future across all industries across the world. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Samantha, for sharing your story and for this engaging session. We had so many good questions and thoughtful questions and great discussion. So for everyone, stay tuned for the next and final session of the day, inclusive, accessible, and collaborative storytelling, which will start in 15 minutes at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:15 p.m. Pacific Time. The session will explore the current state of disability storytelling, the importance of intercommunity collaboration, and why above and beyond accessibility features should be the new norm. We appreciate your engagement and for being with us today, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.